Part 3. Jack put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't you dare start thinking like that." Ethan didn't reply. He just looked at the barn, shadows swallowing its familiar shape. The joy of hearing the engine start felt far away now, like a dream fading before morning. Ethan spent the next day in a haze, barely hearing his teachers, barely eating lunch. The barn, his barn, was going to be torn down. The car might not survive the move, and even if it did, where would it go? After school, he trudged to the barn. Inside, dust motes danced in the fading light, and the Ford sat like a stubborn ghost refusing to vanish. Ethan sat in the front seat and ran his fingers across the cracked dashboard. He felt tears threaten, but he blinked them back. His dream had come this far. It couldn't end here. That evening, he went to Grandpa's workbench and pulled out the landline phone. He flipped through the phone book and started making calls. He called Jack. Then he called the salvage yard guy who sold him the alternator. Then the neighbor who had once offered him plywood scraps. One by one, he asked for help. Not just for the car, but for what the barn meant. "Just a few hours," he said, "to help us move the car and salvage what we can. I can't pay much, but I'll work off anything I owe." Jack arrived early Saturday with his trailer and a pickup full of tools. Ethan had barely slept, but adrenaline replaced rest. Soon others began showing up, people Ethan had helped over the past months. Old men with overalls and grease under their nails. A teenage girl from school who'd heard about his project and brought her dad's engine hoist. Even Caleb, the kid who once mocked him, showed up with a dolly and an awkward shrug. "I figured you might need the help," Caleb muttered. "It's kinda cool what you've done." Ethan just nodded. There was no time to waste. For hours they worked, jacking up the car, removing loose parts, reinforcing the trailer ramp. Jack took the lead, barking instructions and handing out wrenches. Ethan darted from tool chest to engine bay, doing everything he'd learned and more. By late afternoon, with a chorus of strained backs and grunted effort, they rolled the Ford onto the trailer. People clapped. Grandpa wiped his eyes. They parked the trailer behind Jack's house, under a corrugated steel awning. It wasn't a barn, but it was safe, solid, dry. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of the trailer and stared at the car under the stars. The dream hadn't died. It had just moved. Winter came and went. Snow piled on Jack's roof, and Ethan spent cold evenings bundled up in his coat, working by lamplight. When spring thawed the ground and the scent of wildflowers returned, the car was almost ready. Tires, replaced. Brakes, working. Wiring, secure. Exhaust, patched. Interior, Spartan but clean. And Ethan, now taller, stronger, and more confident, had finally earned his learner's permit. Jack tossed him the keys one bright morning in May. "You've earned it." Ethan stared at the keys in his hand for a full 5 seconds before looking up, stunned. "Really? You've done the work. Let's see if she rolls." They opened the trailer door, rolled the Ford down the ramp, and let it rest on the gravel drive. Ethan climbed behind the wheel. Jack settled into the passenger seat. "All right, clutch in. Brake firm. Key in the ignition." Ethan nodded, every muscle shaking with anticipation. He turned the key. The engine coughed, rattled, then settled into a steady rumble. Ethan slowly let off the clutch. The Ford shuddered forward. They rolled 10 feet, then 50, then 100. The wind rushed in through the open windows. The smell of oil and fresh-cut grass filled Ethan's nose. His heart pounded. He was driving. Not a video game, not a dream. The real thing. When they returned to the driveway, Ethan parked, killed the engine, and just sat there grinning like a lunatic. Jack chuckled. "Well, kid, guess it wasn't junk after all." Ethan looked over. "Thanks for believing in me." Jack shook his head. "Nah, I just gave you a nudge. You did the rest." Epilogue. Years later, Ethan still remembered every inch of that Ford. It wasn't the fastest car on the road or the prettiest, but it was his. Built by hand, bolt by bolt, with grit, rust, and heart. He'd drive it to school his senior year. He'd enter it in the town's fall fair. He'd fix it again when it stalled, repaint it when it faded, pass it down one day to a son or daughter with a wrench in their hand and dreams in their eyes. And every time he sat behind the wheel and turned the key, he'd remember the first time the engine came to life. And the boy who refused to give up. Because sometimes dreams aren't found. Sometimes they're rebuilt.